This lecture is presented by John Moffat of Open Tuition. For other free lectures, visit opentuition.com.
Okay, I'm looking at the June 2015 paper F9 exam. I've got lectures where I've worked through the multiple choice questions in section A. Now let's look at section B. And first of all, question 1. Always read the requirements first, and it says required A, evaluate whether a money market hedge or a forward market hedge would be preferred on financial grounds by Rose Company. 5 marks, so it's going to be a bit of a rush. B, briefly explain the nature of a forward rate agreement and discuss how a company can use a forward rate agreement to manage interest rate risk. Again, 5 marks. So 50% there is written. However easy or hard you find part A, you've got to make sure you're at least written something for part B in order to make sure you've passed. Anyway, let's do part A first. Rose expects to receive €750,000 from a credit customer in the European Union in 6 months' time. The spot exchange rate is 2.349 euros per dollar. The 6-month forward rate, 2.412 euros per dollar. The following commercial interest rates are available to Rose. So for euros and dollars, we've got the deposit rate, the borrow rate, and as usual, they're annual rates. No surplus cash. They want a money market hedge, forward market hedge, and compare. Well, let's do forward first, because that's the quicker of the two. If we go for a forward rate, and we've got one there, 2.412 euros per dollar, then whatever the exchange rate turns out to be in 6 months' time is irrelevant. If we've gone for this agreement, we will convert 2.412 whatever happens, and therefore the receipt will be fixed. So if we go forward, there'll be a receipt in 6 months' time. It's €750,000. To convert to dollars, it's 2.412 euros per dollar, so we'll divide by 2.412, which gives us $310,945. And that will be fixed. So whatever happens to the exchange rate, we're guaranteed to get 310,000 in 6 months' time. On the other hand, if we use a money market hedge, this is the one that always needs slightly more thought. And, well, you need to learn the rules, and then again it's speed, but it inevitably takes slightly longer. Using the money markets, there's always these 3 steps. Here we expect to receive €750,000 in 6 months' time. If we're not using forward rates, we can only convert at today's spot. To be able to do that, the first thing we'll do is borrow euros on the strength of the 750 we're receiving. We're going to borrow. What interest will we pay? Well, borrowing euros is 8% a year. We're doing it for 6 months, so it'll be 8 over 2. We'll pay 4% interest. And therefore, how many euros can we afford to borrow? We're receiving 750,000. At 4%, we can afford to borrow we're in euros still, 721,154. If we borrow that many euros now, at 4%, then in 6 months' time, we'll be owing exactly 750,000. And when the customer pays us, it'll pay off the borrowing. Step 2, well, having got 721,000 euros now, we'll convert to dollars now. at whatever today's spot is. So 721,154 at today's spot rate from the question, 2.349. And so it'll give us dollars of $307,005 now. And finally, as I explained in the lecture, although we could stop there and take the money now, to be able to compare with the forward rate where the money will appear in 6 months' time, we won't take the $307,000 now, we'll deposit dollars for 6 months. The interest we'll be getting, well, dollar deposit rate, it's 2% a year. We're depositing for 6 months. So about that with 1%. And therefore, how much will it have grown to? We were depositing 307,005 at 1% interest. It'll have grown to $310,075. Again, this is fixed in 6 months' time. You know, these are fixed interest deposits and borrowing. So we guarantee 310 in 6 months' time. There's the workings, but don't lose a silly mark. It says evaluate which would be preferred. And I'm not going to waste time trying to run the marking scheme, whether this is half mark or 1 mark. You get that mark for the right conclusion on your figures. Money market gives me, these are receipts, remember, 310,075. Forward gave me 310,945. And so all of the difference is minimal. You would prefer, on pure financial grounds, forward market. There we are. So, as with all the calculation ones, it's this combination of being 100% happy with the technique, studying and learning and practicing, and then a speed on the calculator. And I've probably said lots of times in other lectures, do show your workings properly. Don't just write a figure down. I'm not stupid. I could have got that 310 on my calculator. But you know, the marks are for the workings rather than the final answer. Just one stupid mistake on the calculator and you get the wrong figure, you'd get 0. Because I've shown my workings, it's clear I know what I'm doing. I'd still get most of the marks. Anyway, said enough there. What about part B? Briefly explain the nature of a forward rate agreement and discuss how a company can use a forward rate agreement to manage interest rate risk. So, make sure you've read it properly. Although part A was on foreign currency risk management, B is talking about interest rates and a forward rate agreement. An FRA, I'm not going to write a full answer. I never do in these lectures. It's silly. You've got the examiner's answer there. You can read it yourself and learn from it. And remember, examiner always writes more than he's expecting you to write. But the main points you must write, or you must be happy with a forward rate agreement. When you're borrowing or depositing money, if you do nothing, the rate of interest at the time you start the deposit or borrowing can have changed. There's risk involved. A forward rate agreement, a rate is fixed now with the bank to apply at a future date. So there is a similarity with forward exchange rates. But whatever the exchange rate happens to be in the interest rate, whatever the interest rate happens to be in 6 months' time or whenever, becomes irrelevant. The rate is fixed now. He did expect you to carry on and say basically how it worked. What happens is that you pay the actual rate. So I may have agreed a rate of 5%. It may turn out the actual rate is 6%. Well, fine. We pay the actual rate, but then we settle with the bank, or whoever's providing the rate, settle with the bank, the difference between the FRA rate and the actual rate. So if an FRA at 5%, if the actual rate is 6%, we pay 6%, the bank gives us back 1%. If the FRA is 5% and the actual rate is 4%, we pay 4%, but then we have to pay the bank the difference. We have to pay them 1%. So the net result, we end up paying 5% whatever happens. So that's what it is. That's the nature of it. How can we use it to manage interest rate risk? Well, we've effectively said it, but using an FRA effectively fixes the interest rate. Whether the actual rate is higher or lower. Clearly, we're not certain now what it'll be in the future, whether it's higher or lower. There is therefore risk. By fixing the rate with an FRA, the risk is removed. It doesn't matter whether the actual rate is higher or lower. So, and that's it. As I say, you can read what he's written, as always, and learn from it. But that would get, what I've written there is quite sufficient. That would get the full 5 marks. So that part B should be pretty quick, which means you did have an extra few minutes, given all the workings involved in part A. Okay, that was question 1. Let's leave that there.